The long weekend came and went, and the lacrosse action was on the quiet side. We look at what went down in Saskatchewan, serve up a quiz, and look back on a shocker in St. Albert. All that and more now on the Junior Beast Pod on CROW LAX TV.
Welcome back to the Junior Beast Pod here on CROW LAX TV. My name is Keenen, as always, joined by, it's a pleasure for you to join me every week. Muhammad is with me. Week 5 in action already as, one game played so far this week. And, having it been the long weekend last weekend, it wasn't a huge weekend of action, but, still some stuff to talk about.
Yeah, no, a few games that overlapped into this week. We have one to talk about that took place in St. Albert last night. But before we get to that, we should go back and start last Thursday, the 15th, where the Shamrocks would take down the Marauders. And much of the same as the Shamrocks, as we on last episode, absolutely own this series. They win the game by 6. Seth Miller goes for 3 and 3. Tyler Auger, 2 goals, 3 assists. Meanwhile, for the Marauders, Frank Gallup did add a goal and 2 apples. I think some of this is probably in the Marauders' head at this point. Obviously, the Shamrocks were coming off that loss to the CROW, so you knew they were going to respond and probably play a near ceiling game. So it's not a real surprise here that this was the result. But for as tight as this division seems on the surface, it seems like the Shamrocks just have a lot of these teams numbered.
Yeah, I didn't expect a hugely different outcome. Like you said, we've touched on it. The Shamrocks have had the Marauders number ever since the Marauders became a Junior B club. So it's kind of all the same. I do agree. I think it is in the Marauders' head at this point, knowing that you've only beat the Shamrocks once in, I think, went back, it was, 10 years? Something like that. Yeah, so, at some point, it's going to change, but as of right now, it just kind of sits same old, same old.
Yeah, and that's a big bounce-back win for Calgary as they, as I said, had lost their previous game to St. Albert at home in what is now looking like a huge surprise. We'll get to that in a second. Next up, on that same night, the Rebels would take down the Outlaws by a score of 10-2, and I know you were updating this score as the game went along because I was also doing a game in St. Albert at the same time, and I noticed the Rebels went up 7-0 right away in this game and then just sort of cruised from there. I'll let you talk about this one because you were in the building for it.
Yeah, so, after the first period, 7-0, and then pretty much right off the hop in the second made it 8-0. So it was it was a tale of two clubs. It's something that we've seen over the last few years anyway, where the Outlaws may kind of struggle on home floor, and I don't know how much this really is contributing now, thinking of it. Is the Ken Nickel, that arena, is that contributing in any way to how the Outlaws are playing? Because like I mentioned it on the broadcast, given how that building is constructed and the way that their arena is, you're basically below ground level. And that's contributing to, a more damp floor, and it's a bit more humid in that building. It heats up really fast. So, in a way, does that almost, hurt the Outlaws in a way?
Yeah, I don't know because the opposing teams have to come in there as well, right? So you would think if all those factors were at play, it would give the Outlaws an advantage because they would be somewhat used to it.
Fair. True.
I know growing up, we had to, as part of the Warriors organization, we would always have our tryouts there. And it is pretty depressing going in that place. Like, it's dark. And there's no glass on the one side. Sometimes the floor, they've done a good job with the floor. Like, I don't think the floor has been an issue since they moved in, but the floor used to be really dusty and things like that. But it just has that dungeon-like feel. But I mean, again, that's the same for the team coming in too, right? So,
Yeah.
um, is it a great arena? No, but I don't think we can attribute anything to the arena when we're talking about the Outlaws and some of their results.
Well, I will say the Rebels, they did, like I said, put their foot on the gas like right out of the gate. I mean, you go up 8-0 on a team, and you might as well kind of cruise to the end. Like it wasn't really a contest, I want to say, but I will say there were some Outlaws that did impress me. I know both the Porters really impressed me in this early season, so I'm excited to see what happens. You know, as the season moves forward for the Outlaws, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, just over this past weekend, the Miners had announced their roster, and I think both the Porters are APs on that Miners roster.
Yeah, that's going to help the Outlaws now that they know sort of what they have. Like that roster was finally announced, so they're going to be able to move forward and sort of set their lineup the way put themselves in the best position they can to succeed. They get the Porters back. There's a couple other guys trying out like Kai Ellis. They do lose Hobday. They get Carter Grace back, and a couple others. So that is going to help them. And they're going to be probably less reliant on APs. So we'll see. We'll see how they fare here. They got a big game coming up on Friday night on CROW LAX against the Crude, and then also Thursday, Keenen out in St. Albert. It was the Crude taking down the Warriors in the first of two meetings that they have played over the last week. Liam Elliott would score 4 goals in the first period alone. Um, and the Crude kind of led from the jump here, and the Warriors were in it really for most of the game. But the Crew definitely weren't playing their best lacrosse. The Warriors were fighting with a short lineup. They were using, I want to say, 4 or 5 guys that were not in the lineup, some of which were APs when they met last night. But they played hard and they gave the Crew to run in this game. Uh, Overall, the I would say that the game was pretty helter skelter. There wasn't really much rhythm to it. I thought that the Warriors did a good job of slowing down the Crude offense. There were times where they were pretty aggressive on D. They got Redlick back in this game. He really helped them get the ball up the floor. Um, I don't really. I'll have a lot more to say about the second game. This game um, was just sort of happened, and I didn't think anybody really stood out per se, other than like, of course, Elliott scoring 4 goals in one period. But it was just sort of a game that didn't really have much to it. It wouldn't have much character. So the Crude were able to get the win. They weren't happy with it after the game. I mean, they weren't happy with how the game played out. They weren't happy with how they played. But they did get the win, and that would set up um, a couple of games out east that would take place on Saturday night or on Saturday and Sunday. Um, the Kings would sweep the Blizzard out in Regina by scores of 9-3 and 11-6. I talked about this guy on the opener. Ryan McDonald scores a combined 7 goals in the two games. He really led the charge offensively for the Kings. And I know the Blizzard are in a rebuild and they've had a ton of changeover, but this is a psychological victory for the Kings to start the season with a pair of wins against a team they haven't been able to beat very much, and especially in the playoffs. So to get these wins to start their season, I think that's really big for them. And the young Blizzard team, I think, still getting acclimatized. They didn't go down, like they were more competitive in the second game. They didn't go down easily. Um, but the Kings just had a little bit too much, and I think their experience uh, probably really aided them in these two games. Keenan, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I think for the Kings, this is definitely kind of back to back statement wins to start the year. I mean, you look down the schedule, and they're one of only two clubs in the East that got any automatic wins from the Rockies fold. And at that, they get three automatic wins from the Rockies folding. the SWAT get a lone win, and the Blizz, well, they didn't play the Rockies at all this year, so they have nothing. So realistically, when you look at the full season picture here, including the default wins, the Kings are already 5-0. Like, that's a way to say, like, look, we're looking to take the East this year by storm, and we're gonna go down. And if we do go down, we're not gonna go down without a fight. And yeah, I think this is just, given the way that they played against the Blizz, I think this is the Kings' season to lose the East. Honestly,
Yeah, I mean they're in a position where it's all there for them, and it'll be a question of whether they are able to take advantage of it or not. I think their schedule does set up nicely for them. They're going to play three less games because they get all those wins against the Rockies. They had a three-game set with the Rockies, all in Lethbridge, that have already gone in the win column. So they're 5-0 already. And we'll see where the season takes them. But I think it's clear they are the favorites in the East. Now let's conclude our Week 5 recap with Warriors. Well, it's actually Week 4 recap, Week 5 pod. Yada yada yada.
yeah, but this game
But
technically fell on week 5, and early
yeah,
week game, so kind
yeah,
of
the
weird
start of
timing
Week
with the
5.
pod.
Yeah, start of Week 5. But this game was interesting, Keenan, and this was a shocker. Really, it really was, and full marks, full credit to the Warriors for going into St. Albert and getting this win 11-8. Um, man, I don't even know where to start. They the Warriors did have a much better lineup than they've had. They got Brody Stashnik back, who was let go by the Miners. They got Regan Carey back, who was let go by the Miners. Redlick was playing in his second game. They got Nicholson back, who was in BC over a couple of, or for the week prior, so he missed the previous game. And there were a couple other newer players in the lineup, and they just played hard, and they didn't let. At no point did the Crew get out to a multi-goal lead, and they took charge about, I don't know, late first, early second, and did a lot of damage in transition. I thought they got a few goals, one shorthanded that really turned momentum. Brody Stashnik got one, got that shorthanded tally. Uh, and despite like huge performances offensively from at least finishing wise from Elliott and Fodchuk, Elliott had another 4 goals, Fodchuk with 3. I just thought that the Warriors played like sounder defense. Like I said, they created more in transition, and they were able to put pressure on the Crude, and the Crude had to try to come from behind in the third, and um, their offense just wasn't moving enough. Their off-ball game was pretty non-existent. It was all about Fodchuk and Elliott trying to tuck underneath and go to the net. I just thought there was just too much stagnant play. And there was just a lot there to be left to be desired. I thought, if you're talking from a Crude standpoint, and obviously they weren't again happy with their performance. We'll see. It's just so weird to be talking about this after what they did against the Shamrocks. Um, it's a weird situation. I don't really know how to describe it. Um, I don't really know what they are right now. I don't. They do need better goaltending. Again, the Warriors, I think, scored like, I think they had like 7 goals on 24 shots in this game. At one point. So that's something that needs to be better. Yeah, just a tough loss for the Crude and a big win for the Warriors. And I should say Ava Pinch was very good in net. She made some really nice saves on quick sticks, back doors, and some really good looks in tight. She was athletic. She was moving well in the net, and I thought she was a difference maker for the Warriors. And then Dylan Nicholson, man, 6 goals in this game. Six, yes, 6. Scored over half of the Warriors' goals. This is a kid that I was fortunate enough to have coached and to I know during COVID he was working, doing skill work with me and stuff like that, and he's worked really hard to get to where he is. This is a guy who's played 3 years of Tier 2 lacrosse. He's in his fourth year. He made the jump this year. He was able to make the team, and my God, just incredible production. Can't say enough of what he's done and he's accomplished. So good for him. And we'll get to him a little later on. But yeah, I just a big win for the Warriors and tough one for the Crew.
Yeah, no, I agree. When I look at this game, I mean, honestly, the pair of games over the 2 games in the 5 days, I mean, I don't think from what we saw of the Crude against the Shamrocks, comparative to what we saw in those past 2 games, it's practically a night and day team with that. And I agree. I don't know, like, really what to say about it. Like, where do the Crude go from here? Because you have a statement win against the Shamrocks, and then, well, for lack of a better term, you screw the pooch on 2 games in a row against the Warriors. Sure, you split that 1-1, but you're still not playing the way that you want to, right? So, where do the Crude sit here? Like, right now, they currently sit second in the North at 3-3. They've played 6 games, counting the default wins. You've got the Outlaws hot on your tail at 2-2 with only 4 games played, and the Rebels are basically untouchable. They're already at 4-0, including default wins. So where do the Crude go from here, realistically?
Yeah, it is. It's a tough situation, and I'm not sure what's gonna give there. Well, something actually has given there. Um, Tonight, head coach Garen Schmerman decided that it was time for him to step down. So he's no longer the head coach of the St. Albert Crude. I believe Terry's going to take the reins as the coach, as the head coach. And with Garen leaves Bryce, his brother. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see what develops there, what direction they choose to go in. They've made moves to try to really compete this year,
And I think they're
so they'll
wonderful
probably
moves that
stick.
they made, quite frankly.
Yeah, yeah. On paper, they're great moves, but yeah, it's right now it's not playing out in their favor. They will have Graham Dickin for the game Friday night against the Outlaws. Obviously, he had a big game against the Shamrocks. He was unavailable for those 2 Warrior games that have happened since because they were midweek games, and he's living in Calgary. So there is some help on the way in terms of personnel. They get Harris back as well. So there are some guys that'll be added to the lineup that haven't been playing still. But yeah, that I just the expectations for them are just much higher for me this year, and it hasn't shown on the floor for the
And
three
I
games I've seen. I've done 3 games, and I can only speak to those because I know they got the big win in Calgary against the Shamrocks, but I wasn't there for that. So that's why I say for the games I've seen, it hasn't been there for me.
and I think, like, we are talking about where do they go from here, and I think this weekend coming up is going to be a big test for them. Which I just want to point out, I think it's stupid that the Crude are playing 3 games in a single week here. Like, they played Tuesday against the Warriors, then they play Friday against the Outlaws, and Saturday against the Mavs. Like, why are they playing 3 games in a single week of action? I think that's just
And then there'll be a
stupid.
point where they're not
But
playing for 2 weeks.
exactly. So why are we not spreading out these games?
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I think this upcoming weekend is really going to be where the scales are going to tip. Which way? I don't know. But you have a game against the Outlaws that's basically a must win. Is if the Outlaws win that, the Outlaws are ahead of you in the standings with tied points game in hand. Or 2 games in hand, technically. So, I mean, that's a must win for the Crude. And then against the Mavericks, we can get to that a little bit later when we get into a breakdown, but I don't know how that game's going to shape out for the Crude, quite honestly. But we'll get to that a little later when we look at our Week 5 preview.
Yeah, big weekend for them, obviously, with 2 games still on tap. and they just for morale purposes they need that win, especially Friday against an Outlaws team that's going to come in there and try to knock them off and try to get positioning, on that second spot right now in the North, because now it's starting to look like it might get tight with the Warriors now getting what is technically their second win, the Outlaws technically having two, and I say technically because each team has a Rockies win, and the Crew are at three with a Rockies win, so might start to get tighter than anyone would have expected, and we'll see what develops in the North. So Keenan, we got a little extra time here because it was a lighter slate. So I wanted to fire some questions at you. A little bit of a round table discussion here. I'm just gonna ask you the question and just give your initial thoughts, and you can give a bit about why or why not you're answering the way you are. And we'll go from there. So let's start off with will a coach get fired this season? Key word is fired, not resigned, not step down, like flat out fired. We saw one last year. Will we see one again?
Remind me, who was it last year?
Phil Smythe with the Outlaws.
Right, yes. Um, this year, I honestly don't think we're going to see a firing this season. Again, like you said, stepping downs or resignings aside, I don't think we're going to see a firing this season, though. Reason being is most of these clubs are performing to, and I say most, are performing to the level that I think they're expected to this season. Obviously, the Crude aren't doing as well as maybe they projected on paper should be. The Rampage are probably not doing as well as they feel they could be right now in the Central. But in terms of firing, I think all these clubs will stick it out with their current coaches to the end of the year, at least, if not beyond that.
Yeah, and I also would say that we don't really know who's good. Like who's good in this league this year? We really don't know. Like
And it's weird
the
to be
re-
saying that 5 weeks into the season, or like in the fifth week of the season.
yeah,
Nobody has really shown their full cards yet, I feel, even though, teams have, with default wins, teams have already played a quarter of their schedule.
yeah. Like the Rebels and the Mavericks are contenders. We know this. They established that last year. They've done nothing to tell anyone they're not this year. And when you look at their teams, they should be. But even the Rebels took some hard losses, like with in terms of personnel with the junior A's recently. They lost a couple of guys, or at least one or actually two, that came out of nowhere. That I know they weren't expecting to lose. So I mean, they're going to be fine. I would imagine they'll be fine in the North, but that's going to do some damage to their sort of their big picture goals. Do they have guys that could step up? Probably, but we'll see. The Mavericks are in a tough division. They play a unique style of lacrosse. They're always going to be tough to play. They're a contender, but like the list is very short. The Shamrocks have the pedigree, we know that, but it's a different team. So like it's very tough. It's hard to say, oh yeah, this is a very good team or that's a very good team. Like I've watched, I'll say this: the games this year have not been good. Like the quality of the game, the quality of the level of play has not been high. So that's the first thing that you need to start seeing as the season goes along, like some improvement in sort of the pace and improvement in the skill level, and just the overall ambiance of the game. I do think the game, if I compare the last Crude Warrior game to the previous Crude Warrior game, it was much better. And I think a lot of that was the Warriors had a better lineup playing. Um, but yeah, we want to see the level of play pick up for sure. And we'll see if that happens. I'm sure it will. But yeah, I think it's that point of the time of the season where things should start to pick up, and hopefully we start to see some teams separate themselves a little bit. So with that, Keenan, I'll ask you this next question: which team will be the most active at the deadline and why?
Most active at the deadline. Oh, man. I, I don't know if I can answer this one properly, given the fact that, as we mentioned just in that last question, teams haven't really showed if they're good or not. Like, I think this one's going to come down to, honestly, the weeks leading up to the deadline is who's going to be most active. I think it's going to come down to how the playoff picture looks once we get into, week 8, week 9, week 10 kind of thing, right? So I honestly cannot give you a proper answer because we don't know fully what these teams are capable of.
Yeah, I'll tell you my answer. It's the Shamrocks. They're hosting the Founders. Their division is there for them.
Cop out.
Um,
Cop out.
no, it's a fact though. This is just this is straight up fact. I think they know they have holes they need to address,
Yeah.
and I think I just they don't. You don't get to host the Founders very often or any national championship. I do think that they're gonna add, whether that's out of like I could see some couple junior A players get moved down at the deadline. The Mountaineers or the Raiders might acquire couple of guys that might push a couple guys down. They could go to BC. I know some guys in Cranbrook came over last year, not to the Shamrocks, but they came into the RMLL with the Chill and the Mavericks. Um, they could go and they could acquire somebody in BC Junior B. Like there's ways they can do it, but we'll see. I do expect them to be a lot more active though, than they have been in the past. But that would be my pick there.
And I mean, Jason
Um,
Crook's a
oh,
smart
go ahead. Yeah,
man. Yeah, Jason Crook's a smart guy. He knows what he's looking for, and he knows that, it's gonna probably be a very tight race in the South this year. So I could understand seeing the Shamrocks, be quite active come the deadline.
yeah, I would expect them to. So next up, will the playoff format be extended by next year?
By next year, flat out,
Yeah.
no. I don't think so. I don't think.
Come on,
And
man.
this is gonna sound horrible. All right. So I've been looking, and we've already changed the Larry Bishop this year to a 5-game slate on Friday, a 5-game slate Saturday, and a single game Sunday, single game Monday. I think that's enough. Like, this league will say that's enough change for a few years. I don't think they're going to change the playoff format at least until 27 season.
I could
28
live
if we're
with it.
lucky.
I mean, I could live with it if they wait one more year, but I just think it's long overdue. I hope by next year it happens, but
Are you thinking
um,
like 5-game,
yeah,
best of 5?
at least best of fives, and
Now,
then
here's a question back to you. Do you play that in a week, or do you play that in 2 weekends?
you would split it up. Yeah, you wouldn't. The week is too tight. I don't think you would do it that way. You would go.
I mean, like every second day kind of thing, right? Like a
Yeah,
Monday,
yeah,
Wednesday, Friday kind of
yeah,
thing. Or do you do like a Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Saturday,
yeah.
Sunday kind of thing?
I wouldn't jam it all together. I would just go, especially because it's all regional. I would just go like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and then if necessary, like Monday, Wednesday. Bam, you're done. And you can shorten the regular season a little bit if you want. Like go to eight, let's say 18 instead of 20. Like we're really only adding if you go from 3 to 5. And yeah, if you go from 3 to 5, you're only really adding at the most 4 playoff games. So it's not really a big deal, but it makes your product better. It makes making the playoffs more meaningful. And it extends the series, allows it to breathe, and it allows you to put a day in between each game. And I think you'll see good coaching put at an advantage because they can sort of watch some tape, readjust and adjust to some things. And so I really would encourage that. Ontario, hey, like hell, Ontario plays. This is Ontario Junior B. They play best of fives throughout, and they play 4 series. So Alberta can do it for 2. That's the end of the story.
Yeah.
But I mean, until I see it happen, I'm not going to believe it ever will. But I hope so. I'll wait for Jansen to be on the podcast, and then we'll really rip into it. But
We'll make sure we have him on later this season because I
yeah,
want to hear that opinion.
He's gonna. I mean, he's even stronger on it than I am. So just wait.
Has been for years.
Yeah. All right. So up next, will an Eastern team reach the final for the third time in a row? The last time it was an all Alberta final was 2022 when the Shamrocks and Warriors went at it. Of course, the Warriors would go on to medal and win bronze at that Founders before winning it the next year. But will we see the first all Alberta final since then, or will an Eastern team return to the final once again?
I think it's going to come down to the late season play for the Kings. And I know that that also sounds a bit like a cop out, but I think it's going to depend on how the Kings season progresses. Because at this point, it with the Kings sitting at a technical 5 games played and 5-0, I don't see anybody being able to kind of knock them off that throne, barring an absolute, late season, mid season comeback from the SWAT or the Blizzard. So I think if the Kings even kind of, dip in the middle of the season but find their form back into the late part of the season, I think we're going to see another East team in the final. If the Kings kind of, stumble out of the gate going into, those games in July, then I think we're in for an all Alberta final.
I think we'll get a good sense. I think we'll get a good sense of what they are when they go on the road and play good teams.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Kings. Like, I'm not even talking, they don't need to win a bunch of them, but if they're at least competitive and they get a couple of key wins on the road, I think that'll say a lot, and it'll signal that they're a real contender. In the past, it's always been, can they keep the ball out of the net? If they can do that this year, like this first weekend would imply that they're on the right track. Now the Blizzard are not the same, but as they've been, but if they can do that, they'll put themselves in a position to be a real contender. I do think they're a top 4 team, but we'll wait and see how serious they are. So,
And
lastly, oh yeah,
to
go ahead.
to that point, I think it's interesting to note how the Kings schedule breaks down this season, because their next game they play is going to be on Thursday the 22nd. So the night that you're hearing this podcast, when it gets posted, they're playing at the SWAT on May 22nd. They don't play another road game until Friday, June 20th. Keep that in
Yeah,
mind. They are staying at home for a whole month before they go on the road. They will have technically played, including the default wins against the Rockies. They'll have played 9 of their 10 home games before they even play their second road game.
yeah,
9 of their last 10 are on the road, and they're against teams like the Marauders, like the Shamrocks, like the Rebels. So that's going to be an interesting road series for them.
Yeah, that's going to be really tough for them because that means that they're going to be spending a long time on the road right before the playoffs. So, it's obviously going to be grueling for them. That might take some that it's going to wear on them, and it might be some fatigue that sets in. But I think they are used to it, not as much as the Blizzard are because they've been doing it for longer. But
Yeah.
that is going to be, I think that is going to be a factor. We'll see how they're able to handle that. But lastly, I want to ask you: do you see a Alberta team, whoever it is? There could be two because the Shamrocks are hosting. Um, if they don't win Alberta, there will be a second. So who do you see? Actually, regardless, there's going to be a second Alberta team. So who do you see getting in? And you don't even need to answer who you see getting in, but do you think whoever gets in will medal this year?
How many. Now, I am still a bit shaky on the Founders, mind you. How many full teams are there at Founders? 8, 10?
It changes year to year. Like sometimes, like some years Nova Scotia sends a team, some years they don't. Some years Winnipeg goes like the Blizzard, some years they don't. Sometimes you'll get like last year New Brunswick sent a team. It changes year to year. Usually you'll have around 8 teams. Sometimes you'll have 9. very odd. The odd time you might have 10, but it's usually 8 or 9 is typically the number.
Given that there'll be two Alberta teams, that's a 25% chance at medaling. And wow, Keenan, you can do basic math. Congratulations. So I think there's a good chance that an Alberta team is able to medal. Who's the other team besides the Shamrocks that sits in that other spot is really going to tell. If we've got a team in there like, one of those teams like the Rebels, like the Mavericks, I think there's a very high possibility that they do. And especially if it's the Mavericks, mind you. The Mavericks have the experience of going out to Ontario, wherever it was last year. Sure, they don't get the result they want, but if it's the Mavericks, for example, they're only an hour and a half up the QE2 from Calgary. They're basically on home turf. And I think that plays very well into the Mavericks' hands if they are that team, other Alberta team sitting opposite the Shamrocks.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think, I mean, obviously, as always, Ontario is the favorite in the Founders, and then after that, Alberta's usually right there. Whether or not, I think it's very hard to call it now, but I think you gave a relatively good answer there. Stylistically, it'll depend on who gets in, and obviously who they have to play in their pool. The pools have a lot to do with it too. Like your road and stuff, it can be a lot harder or a lot easier, depending on how things shake out. So I know the Shamrocks will probably set it up um, in a way that'll probably be ideal for them. The host always does. So that'll probably give them a better shot than they otherwise would, but we'll see. It should be an interesting national tournament, and I'm looking forward to it. So that wraps up the questionnaire. Is there anything else we wanna add other than Beast of the Week here before we get to Boss of the Week before we get to the preview for Week 5?
I don't think I have anything else on my docket. I'm excited to see how Week 5 shapes out, just because we have a lot of games on the schedule for the weekend. So yeah, I'm curious to see who you've got for Beast of the Week, because there's a few contenders for Week
Yeah,
4, even with that
yeah,
shortened
for sure.
schedule.
For sure. I mean, Elliott filled the net. I mean, Ryan McDonald, huge weekend at home against the Blizzard. But I got to give it to the guy who put up 6 goals in one game. That's Dylan Nicholson of the Warriors. From rags to riches, goes from being an afterthought in tier two to being a big time guy in tier one. At least for this night, as he goes off for 6 goals and really lifted the Warriors along with a number of other players, including goaltender Ava Pinch. But your boss of the week is Dylan Nicholson. Good job, my friend. You earned it. All right. So with that, let's go to our Week 5 preview. What's on tap?
All right, so obviously we've already played our first game of Week 5, that being the Warriors at the Crude. That game taking place on Tuesday, where the Warriors would walk out of St. Albert with the victory. Still on CROW to come, another 6 games this weekend for Junior B Tier 1 action. Only 3 of those are for Junior B. You're looking at Outlaws at the Crude on Friday night, that game 8 p.m. from Jerome McGinley Arena. Also from Jerome McGinley Arena on the Saturday will be the Mavericks coming up the QE2. That game 6 p.m. And then on Sunday, the Red Deer Rampage come into Beaumont, looking to, maybe get a little bit of a step on their slow start to the season, as that game will hit at 2 p.m. on CROW. The other 3 games on tap this weekend on CROW are 2 on Saturday. One will be the first taste of Senior B action that we have this year on CROW, as the Calgary Mountaineers will visit the Fort Saskatchewan Rebels. That game Saturday, 3 p.m. The other Senior B matchup will be the Knights visiting the Rebels. That game Sunday at 2 p.m. And the final game, I know I jumped around a bit, but will be Saturday at 5:30 p.m. as the Cardinals will visit the Capital Region Saints in Alberta Major Female.
And Keenan, and if I could for a second, I just want to take the time to implore people. if they can, to just take that extra second to hit the thumbs up on these videos, so the just helps the algorithm, and it allows it to be seen by more people, and obviously the more people that watch these games, the better. We want to get as many eyes on them as possible. Some of them are very high level games that should keep people entertained, and the thumbs up does a lot for that. So just hit the thumbs up whenever you can, and let's get this product out to people.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Well, that is going to do it for this week on the Junior Beast. As always, my name is Keenan. Thank you, Muhammad, for joining me. Once again, we'll be back next week with your Week 5 recap, looking into Week 6. Who knows what's going to happen this weekend, because we've got a lot that we could be talking about come next weekend. So be sure, like, subscribe, comment, hit that notification bell. You'll be notified every single time we go live all season long, and you'll be notified every single time a new Junior Beast episode drops right here on CROW LAX TV. Thank you for tuning in to the Junior Beast.